I watched through the security camera feed on my phone as Emma kicked down the door to my old bedroom, her face twisted with that familiar rage I'd seen 1,000 times before. In my previous life, this moment had broken me. In this one, I smiled as she stood in the empty room, screaming at the bare walls. "Where is everything?" Her shriek echoed through the vacant space. "Where are all her things?" My mother rushed in behind her, equally shocked. They'd been planning this raid for weeks. I knew because I'd lived through it before. In my first life, they'd taken everything while I was at work. My grandmother's china, my favorite mug collection, my electronics, even my clothes. They'd claimed it was payment for years of room and board, despite the fact that I'd been paying rent since I turned 18, but this time, I'd moved out 3 months ago. They just didn't know it yet. "She must have known," my mother hissed, pulling out her phone. "That ungrateful little—" I turned off the camera feed and set my phone down on the marble countertop of my new apartment, a penthouse in the city's most exclusive building, paid for in cash. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, catching on the very mug Emma had tried to steal. Hand-painted porcelain, the last gift my grandmother gave me before she died. I took a long sip of coffee and let myself remember. The truck hit me on a Tuesday. I was 28 years old, exhausted from working 2 jobs to support myself while my sister lived rent-free in my parents' house. I'd been carrying groceries across the street, including a set of vintage dishes I'd saved for months to buy, when the driver ran a red light. I remembered the impact, the sound of breaking glass, the wet cough as my lungs filled with blood. And then, most vividly, I remembered my mother's face at my hospital bedside. She wasn't crying, she was going through my purse. "I'll need to access her accounts," she'd said to the nurse, as if I were already dead. "For funeral expenses." I died hearing my sister argue with my mother about who got my apartment. Then I woke up. I was 18 again, in my childhood bedroom, staring at a college acceptance letter I'd seen before. The date on my phone confirmed it. I'd gone back exactly 10 years, a decade of memories pressed against my skull. Every betrayal, every theft, every casual cruelty from the family that was supposed to love me. In my first life, I'd ignored the warning signs. I'd believed my mother when she said blood was thicker than water, that family always came first. I'd sacrificed my happiness, my money, my entire life trying to earn their love. This time, I knew better. This time, I knew exactly what they were. The pattern had started young. I was 5 when Emma was born, and from that moment, I ceased to exist as anything more than an accessory to her life. Every birthday became about her. My parties were canceled because it's too close to Emma's big day. Every achievement I earned was minimized because Emma needs encouragement, not competition. When I got into a prestigious university on a full scholarship, my mother's first words were, "Well, at least now we can afford to send Emma to that private school." They didn't send her to private school. They used my scholarship money, money that was supposed to be mine for living expenses, to renovate Emma's bedroom. I worked 3 part-time jobs through college. Emma got a weekly allowance of $200. When I graduated summa cum laude and got a job at a top firm, my mother threw a party for Emma's high school graduation. Mine was the same week. No one came to my ceremony. In my first life, I'd swallowed it all. I told myself they loved me in their own way, that I was being selfish for wanting recognition, that family meant sacrifice. The breaking point came during what was supposed to be my engagement party. I'd been dating Marcus for 3 years. He was kind, successful, and for the first time in my life, someone put me first. When he proposed, I was terrified to tell my family, but Marcus insisted we do it right. He wanted to meet them, to celebrate with them. I should have known better. My mother turned my engagement party into Emma's birthday celebration. The cake said, "Happy 23rd, Emma." My name wasn't mentioned once. When Marcus tried to make a toast to our engagement, my father cut him off to talk about how proud he was of Emma's new Instagram following. Emma spent the entire night flirting with my fiancé. 2 months later, she succeeded. I came home early from a business trip to find them together in my apartment, the apartment I paid for while Emma lived rent-free with our parents. Marcus had the decency to look ashamed. Emma just smiled. "He said I was more fun than you," she'd said, stretching like a cat in my bed. "Less uptight, more alive." That was the word that haunted me. Alive. I'd spent my entire life making myself small, quiet, accommodating, trying to earn crumbs of affection from people who'd never valued me. And my reward was to be told I wasn't alive enough. I'd moved back in with my parents after that. I couldn't afford the apartment on my own, and Marcus had been paying half. It was supposed to be temporary. It lasted 5 years. 5 years of watching Emma parade through the house with my ex-fiancé turned boyfriend. 5 years of my mother criticizing every choice I made while praising Emma's free spirit. 5 years of working myself to exhaustion while they threw parties I wasn't invited to in my own house. The final betrayal came when my grandmother died. Grandma Chen had been the only person who ever truly loved me. She lived in Hong Kong, and I'd visited her every summer growing up. She taught me Cantonese, told me stories of her youth, and filled my head with dreams of a bigger life. When I turned 16, she gave me a set of hand-painted porcelain, mugs, family heirlooms she'd brought from mainland China decades ago. For your future home, she'd said, when you're free. She died on a Monday. Her lawyer called on Tuesday. She'd left me everything. Her apartment in Hong Kong, her savings, her jewelry. $3 million in total. My mother found out before I did. She was waiting in my room when I got home from work, the lawyer's letter open on my bed. This is a family inheritance, she'd said. Not just yours. I was too stunned to fight, too tired, too beaten down by years of being told I was selfish, ungrateful, worthless. They took it all. My mother said she'd manage it for the family. My father nodded along. Emma squealed about a trip to Paris. I never saw a cent. 3 years later, I died carrying cheap dishes across a busy street, while my family lived in the luxury apartment they'd bought with my grandmother's money. But now I was 18 again, and I remembered everything. My first move was the bank. The day after I woke up in my teenage body, I took the bus to my grandmother's bank, the one I remembered from my previous life. I told them I needed to set up account protections, that I was worried about identity theft. The bank officer, charmed by my mature concern, helped me add security questions and alerts. More importantly, I asked them to notify me the moment anyone else tried to access my account or any potential inheritances in my name. My second move was my grandmother. In my first life, I'd only called her once a month, too busy with school and work and trying to please my family. This time, I called her every week. I practiced my Cantonese with her. I told her about my dreams, my fears, my plans. I also told her the truth about my family. Grandma, I said during one call 6 months after my rebirth, I need to ask you something. In your will, can you make sure everything comes directly to me, not through Mom? There was a long silence on the other end. Then, has your mother been asking about money? Not yet, I said carefully, but I know how she thinks. She's always talking about family assets and shared resources. If something happened to you, and I pray it doesn't for many, many years, I'm afraid she'd try to claim it as a family inheritance. Another silence. Then my grandmother said something that changed everything. I've been worried about that too. Your mother, she's always been difficult about money, even as a child. Let me speak to my lawyer. 3 months later, my grandmother told me she'd updated her will. Everything was in an irrevocable trust with me as the sole beneficiary. My mother couldn't touch it. My father couldn't touch it. Emma definitely couldn't touch it. But there's more, Grandma said. I've been thinking about what you said, about your dreams, about feeling trapped. So I've made some arrangements. There's a scholarship program in Hong Kong I've been supporting. They give grants to promising students who want to study abroad. I've recommended you. Full ride plus living expenses. My hands shook as I held the phone. Grandma, you don't have to accept, but the option is there. Starting next fall if you want it. I wanted it. God, I wanted it. But I had unfinished business first. The scholarship gave me leverage I didn't have in my first life. When my mother started pushing me to go to the local university, to save money and stay close to family, I had an out. I got a full scholarship to Hong Kong University, I announced at dinner. All expenses paid, I'll be leaving in August. My mother's fork clattered to her plate. Hong Kong, that's ridiculous. You can't just move across the world. What about family? What about my education? I countered. It's one of the top universities in Asia. This is an incredible opportunity. It's your grandmother poisoning you against us, my father muttered. Filling your head with ideas. Emma, then 13, just looked confused. She wasn't the monster yet, that would come later, shaped by our parents' favoritism and constant validation. Part of me felt sorry for her. Part of me remembered her face as she smiled in my bed with my fiancé. I hardened my heart. I'm going, I said firmly. The paperwork is already submitted. My mother tried everything to stop me. She hid my passport. She canceled my bank cards. She even called my grandmother, screaming about how I was being stolen from the family. My grandmother's response was to fly to America, stay in a hotel, and personally escort me to Hong Kong. The night before we left, my mother played her final card. If you leave, you're not our daughter anymore, she said. You'll be cut off, completely. Don't come crawling back when you fail. I looked at her, really looked at her. At the woman who'd raised me to be invisible, who'd stolen my inheritance in another life, who'd stood by while Emma destroyed my life. I won't fail, I said. And I won't be back. I saw something flicker in her eyes. For just a moment, I thought it might be regret. Then it hardened into anger. Ungrateful, she spat. After everything we've done for you. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. In my first life, that word ungrateful had been a weapon that kept me chained. In this life, I wore it like armor. Hong Kong was everything I dreamed and more. I threw myself into my studies, worked part-time at my grandmother's friend's import business, and slowly built a life that was entirely mine. No family drama, no walking on eggshells, no making myself small. For the first time in either of my lives, I was free. My mother called occasionally, always with the same script. I was selfish, I'd abandoned the family, Emma missed me. I let the calls go to voicemail. Emma started texting when she turned 16. At first it was innocent, asking about Hong Kong school, my life. But I remembered what she'd become. I kept my responses brief and non-committal. Then came the requests. Can you send money? Mom won't increase my allowance. I want to visit Hong Kong. Can I stay with you? There's this designer bag I want. Can you buy it for me? You owe me for leaving. I blocked her number. My grandmother died when I was 22, exactly as she had in my first life. But this time, I was there. I held her hand. I told her she'd saved me. She smiled and said, Yes, you saved yourself, Bao Bao. I just opened the door. The will reading was a war. My mother had flown to Hong Kong, convinced she'd inherit something. When the lawyer announced that everything, the apartment, the savings, the investments, all of it, was in an irrevocable trust for me alone, she screamed. That's illegal! She manipulated an old woman. I'm her daughter. The lawyer, unimpressed, pointed out that my grandmother had been of sound mind, had multiple witnesses, and had explicitly stated her reasons in a sealed letter. Would you like me to read the letter aloud? He asked. My mother went pale and shut up. I never read the letter. I didn't need to. I knew my grandmother loved me, and that was enough. With my inheritance secured, I had choices. I could have stayed in Hong Kong, built a life there, and never looked back. Part of me wanted to, but I remembered Emma's smile, my mother's greed, my father's indifference, and I knew that if I didn't go back, if I didn't show them exactly what they'd lost, they'd spin a story where I was the villain, where they were the victims. I couldn't let that stand. So I came home. I returned to America when I was 24, 6 years after I'd left, 4 years before my death in the original timeline. I'd spent those years not just studying, but building. I'd used my grandmother's money wisely, investing in startups, real estate, and my own import business. I was a millionaire several times over. I bought the penthouse apartment anonymously through an LLC. I had it furnished with the finest pieces, including a custom display case for my grandmother's mugs. Then I did something that felt beautifully petty. I had the building's security system upgraded with the latest cameras, all accessible through my phone. I wanted to watch. My family didn't know I was back. I'd been careful to stay off social media to keep my return quiet. As far as they knew, I was still in Hong Kong, still estranged, still the ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned them. I spent 3 months just observing. I drove by my parents' house, not the modest home I'd grown up in, but a much larger one in a wealthy suburb. My mother drove a Mercedes. My father had a new Lexus. Emma, now 20, lived at home and drove a BMW I recognized as the exact model I'd dreamed of owning in my first life. They were living well. Too well for a middle manager and a part-time realtor. A little digging revealed the source. After I left, my mother had told everyone that I'd rejected my grandmother's inheritance, that I'd given it to the family instead. She'd used my name to borrow against properties, to open credit cards, to secure loans. She'd been committing fraud for 6 years. In my first life, I'd never known. I'd been too beaten down, too isolated. But this time, I had resources, I had knowledge, and I had a plan. I hired a forensic accountant. What he uncovered was worse than I'd imagined. My mother hadn't just borrowed in my name. She'd been systematically stealing from me for years. She'd intercepted mail from my bank, forged my signature on documents, and even tried to claim my inheritance from my grandmother by presenting a fake will. The fake will had failed. My grandmother's lawyers were too thorough. But my mother had successfully stolen over $200,000 through various schemes, all while telling the family she was managing my affairs. Emma wasn't innocent either. She'd been complicit, using credit cards my mother opened in my name to fund her lifestyle. Designer clothes, exotic vacations, a new car, all paid for with my stolen identity. My father? He'd known and done nothing. That was almost worse. I had everything I needed for a lawsuit. I could have gone to the police immediately, had them arrested, and been done with it, but that would be too easy, too impersonal. I wanted them to understand exactly what they'd lost. I wanted them to feel it. So, I set a trap. I started small. I created a new social media profile, carefully curated to show just enough. Glimpses of my apartment's view, but not the address. Photos of expensive dinners, but not the restaurants. Shots of designer clothes, but not my face. I tagged it with Hong Kong locations, maintained the fiction that I was still abroad. Then I started following local accounts, including Emma's. She had 50,000 Instagram followers documenting her luxury lifestyle, a lifestyle funded by my stolen identity. I watched her post photos in my stolen clothes, my stolen jewelry, my stolen life. I waited for her to follow me back. It took 3 days, then the DM started. OMG, I love your feed. Where did you get that bag? I responded warmly, friendly, playing the role of a fellow influencer. We chatted about brands, travel, luxury goods. I never mentioned who I was. I just listened. Emma complained constantly about how her family didn't appreciate her, how her mother was so controlling about money, how she deserved more. I should have gotten way more from my grandma, she wrote one night. But my sister was such a kiss ass. She got everything. It's not fair. I screenshot that. And every other message where she complained about me, about the inheritance, about how she was entitled to what was mine. After 2 weeks of building rapport, I made my move. I'm actually going to be in your city next month, I wrote. There's this amazing investment opportunity I'm looking into. Want to meet up? I could use a local guide. Emma was thrilled. We set a date, 3 weeks away, at the exact coffee shop where, in my first life, I'd seen her with Marcus for the first time after their betrayal. The irony was delicious. But I had other moves to make first. I contacted Marcus. He was easy to find. He'd never left the city, was working at the same firm, living the same life. According to social media, he wasn't dating anyone. Good. I sent him an email through a professional account. Hello, I'm looking for representation in a potential fraud case. Your firm was recommended. Would you be available for a consultation? He agreed immediately. Lawyers love fraud cases. They're lucrative. I scheduled the consultation for the same day as my coffee with Emma, 1 hour before. The pieces were falling into place. The morning of the meeting, I woke up early and dressed carefully. In my first life, I'd always dressed to be invisible. Muted colors, modest cuts, nothing that would draw attention. Today, I wore power. a crisp white Armani suit, red-soled Louboutins, and the jade pendant my grandmother had given me. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Confident, successful, dangerous. I loved her. Marcus's office was exactly as I remembered. Sleek, modern, designed to impress. The receptionist led me to a conference room, and I waited, my heart pounding not with nerves but with anticipation. When Marcus walked in, he froze. "You," he breathed. "Hello, Marcus." I smiled, cold and sharp. "Surprised?" He recovered quickly. Lawyers are good at that. "I didn't realize. Your email said I used my professional name, Chen Yiling. I go by that now." It was true. I'd legally changed my name in Hong Kong. No point in carrying my father's name when he'd never been a father to me. Marcus sat down slowly, studying me. I could see him trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the girl he'd known, the one who'd been so easy to betray. "You look different," he said finally. "I am different." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Shall we discuss why I'm here?" I spent the next 45 minutes laying out my mother's fraud. Every forged document, every stolen dollar, every fake signature. I watched Marcus's expression shift from shock to horror to professional interest. "This is substantial," he said when I finished. "Criminal charges, civil liability, possibly RICO if we can prove conspiracy. Your mother could face serious prison time." "Good," I said simply. "And your sister? She was a beneficiary of the fraud, but proving she knew, I have proof." I pulled out my phone and showed him the Instagram DMs, the screenshots of Emma bragging about using her sister's credit cards, the photos of her wearing jewelry she claimed I'd given the family. Marcus read through them, his face growing darker. "She's still the same," he muttered. "Excuse me?" He looked up, seeming to realize he'd spoken aloud. "Nothing, just, I'm not surprised, that's all." "You dated her," I said. It wasn't a question. "In fact, you're probably still in contact." He had the grace to look ashamed. "That was a mistake. A huge mistake. He trailed off, searching for words. "Exhausting," I supplied. "Selfish? Cruel?" "All of the above." He rubbed his face. "Look, I know I have no right to say this, but I'm sorry. For what I did, for everything, I was an idiot." "Yes," I agreed, "you were." "Emma told me you were boring, that you were holding me back from living. She made it sound like you were controlling, cold, unfeeling." He laughed bitterly. I was too stupid to see she was describing herself. I could have felt vindicated. In my first life, I would have clung to this apology, this validation. But I'd grown past needing his remorse. "I didn't come here for an apology," I said. "I came here for representation. Will you take my case?" Marcus looked at the folder, then at me. "Yes, absolutely. I'll put together the best team we have. Your mother won't know what hit her." "Good. I want to file by the end of the week." I stood to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Emma thinks she's meeting a potential friend and investor for coffee this afternoon. I'd appreciate it if you didn't warn her." Understanding dawned on his face. "You're going to confront her." "I'm going to introduce myself," I corrected. "She doesn't know I'm back in the country." "She's going to lose her mind," Marcus said, and I couldn't tell if it was a warning or anticipation. "I'm counting on it." The coffee shop was crowded. Perfect. I wanted witnesses. I arrived early, claimed a table by the window, and ordered a latte. Then I pulled out my grandmother's favorite mug, the one Emma had tried to steal in my first life, and took a photo of it sitting on the table. I posted it to Instagram with the caption, "Using Grandma's mug today. Some things are irreplaceable." Emma's response was immediate. "OMG, that mug is gorgeous. Is it vintage?" I smiled and typed, "It is, a family heirloom. See you soon." I watched through the window as Emma pulled up in her BMW, my BMW, paid for with my stolen credit. She was checking her reflection, fixing her hair, practicing her influencer smile. She didn't recognize me at first. I'd changed too much, not just physically, but in bearing, in confidence, in the way I occupied space. She walked past my table twice before I called out, "Emma?" She turned, squinting. "Yes." "Oh, are you?" Then her face went slack. "Lily?" I'd kept my first name, even if I'd changed my last. I smiled. "Surprise." She stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit down, we have a lot to talk about." Emma sat mechanically, her eyes darting around as if looking for escape routes. What? What are you doing here? I thought you were in Hong Kong. You said you were in Kong. I was. Now I'm back. I took a sip of my coffee. Nice car, by the way. BMW 340i, right? That's exactly the car I always wanted. She paled. Mom and Dad helped me buy it. With what money? I asked pleasantly. Dad's salary as a middle manager? Mom's part-time real estate commissions? Or maybe, I leaned forward. With the $200,000 they stole from me? Emma's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Oh, yes," I continued. "I know all about it. The forged signatures, the fake documents, the credit cards opened in my name, the loans taken against my credit. All of it." "I don't know what you're talking about," Emma tried, but her voice shook. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots. Her own words, bragging about using my money, complaining that I'd gotten too much of Grandma's inheritance. That's not. You tricked me." Emma's voice rose. People were starting to stare. "I didn't trick you," I said calmly. "I simply gave you enough rope to hang yourself. You did the rest." Emma's face cycled through emotions: shock, fear, anger, and finally landing on manipulation. It was like watching her put on a mask. "Lily, please," she said, reaching across the table for my hand. I pulled back. "You're my sister. We're family. Can't we work this out?" "Family," I repeated. "You mean like when you slept with my fiancé? Or when you spent years using my identity to fund your lifestyle? Or when you told everyone I abandoned you, when really I was just protecting myself from being bled dry?" Tears sprang to her eyes. I'd seen her use this tactic 100 times, crying to get what she wanted. It had worked on everyone. It wouldn't work on me. "You know what's funny?" I said conversationally. "In my first life, I stopped, realizing what I'd almost revealed. But then I thought, why not? She wouldn't believe me anyway." "Never mind. The point is, I know exactly who you are, Emma. I know what you're capable of, and I'm done pretending we're family." "You can't do this," Emma hissed, dropping the tears. "Mom and Dad will what? They're being served with a lawsuit this afternoon. Multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. I have a team of lawyers and a mountain of evidence. This isn't a negotiation, Emma. This is notification." Emma stood up so fast her chair fell over. "You bitch. You ungrateful, selfish bitch. After everything we did for you, what did you do for me?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Name one thing, one single thing any of you ever did that was actually for my benefit and not your own." She couldn't. She stood there, shaking with rage, unable to articulate a single act of genuine love or care. "That's what I thought," I said softly. "Goodbye, Emma. I'd say I'll see you in court, but honestly, my lawyers will handle it. I have better things to do." I stood, picked up my grandmother's mug, and walked out of the coffee shop. Behind me, hear Emma starting to cry, Real tears this time, tears of rage and fear, and the dawning realization that her entire world was about to collapse. I didn't look back. The lawsuit moved faster than I expected. Marcus wasn't exaggerating about having a good team. They were ruthless. Within a week, my parents' assets were frozen. Within 2 weeks, Emma's car was repossessed. Within a month, criminal charges were filed. My mother tried to spin it, of course. She called everyone she knew, crying about her ungrateful daughter who was destroying the family over money. She went on local news, playing the victim. It backfired spectacularly. The forensic accountants released their findings publicly. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of systematic fraud, hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen, a pattern of abuse that started when I was a teenager. The news stations that had initially been sympathetic to my mother quickly turned. "Monster mother steals daughter's inheritance," read one headline. "Sister spends $200K on stolen credit cards," read another. Emma's Instagram was flooded with comments. Her followers, real ones and fake ones alike, turned on her. Brands dropped sponsorships. Friends distanced themselves. The lifestyle she'd built on my stolen identity crumbled in days. My father tried to reach out, claiming he hadn't known the full extent of my mother's fraud. The evidence said otherwise. His name was on dozens of forged documents. He was complicit, even if he'd been passive about it. The trial was scheduled for 6 months out, but it never made it that far. 3 months in, facing overwhelming evidence and the possibility of a decade in prison, my mother took a plea deal: full restitution of all stolen funds plus damages, community service, 5 years probation, and a permanent restraining order. She wasn't allowed to contact me ever again. Emma and my father got similar deals. The assistant district attorney told me privately that they'd likely have pushed for prison time, but my mother's lawyer had argued that the family was a unit, that they'd all been led astray. I didn't fight it. I didn't need them in prison. I just needed them out of my life. The restraining order was enough. The money came back in pieces over the following year: asset sales, wage garnishments, liquidated investments. I ended up recovering about 70% of what was stolen, plus damages. It was more than enough. But the real victory wasn't the money, it was the space. For the first time in my entire life, either version of it, I was completely free. No family drama, no manipulation, no walking on eggshells or making myself small, just space to breathe. I threw myself into my business. The import company I'd started in Hong Kong expanded to America, then to Europe. I specialized in vintage and antique goods, particularly Chinese porcelain. It felt right, honoring my grandmother's memory by sharing the beauty of her culture. The business exploded. Within 2 years, I was shipping containers of goods monthly, working with museums and collectors, building a reputation as someone who could find the unfindable. I bought a house, not a penthouse this time, but a historic Victorian that needed restoration. I spent a year renovating it personally, choosing every tile, every paint color, every fixture. It was mine in a way nothing had ever been before. I filled it with beautiful things: art, books, music. And in the kitchen, in a custom-built glass case, I displayed my grandmother's mugs, all of them safe and cherished. Marcus and I became unlikely friends. Not romantic, that ship had sailed and sunk, but friendly. He'd left his firm to start his own practice, specializing in family law and fraud cases. He said my case had changed his perspective on what kind of lawyer he wanted to be. "You taught me something," he said once over dinner. We'd fallen into a habit of meeting monthly, comparing notes on life. About resilience, about not being a victim, even when everything is stacked against you. "I learned it the hard way," I said. "Twice." He looked at me curiously. I'd never explained what I meant by my first life, and he'd never pushed. But sometimes I wondered if he suspected something. Life settled into a rhythm. I traveled for work: Hong Kong, Shanghai, London, Paris. I dated casually, nothing serious. I built friendships with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. I volunteered at a nonprofit that helped young women escape abusive families, sharing my story anonymously as encouragement. I was happy, genuinely, freely happy. And then, 3 years after the trial, I got a letter. It came to my business address. They didn't have my home address thanks to the restraining order. The envelope was plain, the handwriting shaky. Inside was a single page written in my mother's hand. "Dear Lily, it began. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to understand. I was jealous of you, of my own daughter. You were always so smart, so capable, so self-sufficient. You never needed us the way Emma did. You never needed anyone. And I needed to be needed. Emma was easy to love. She was dependent, emotional, grateful for every little thing. You were independent from birth. You figured things out on your own. You didn't cry when you fell. You didn't need help with homework. You were just complete without us. I know that's not an excuse. I know I failed you. I failed as a mother, as a person. I chose favoritism over fairness. I chose comfort over integrity. I chose Emma over you, again and again, because loving her was easy and loving you meant accepting that you didn't need me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just asking that you understand. It was never about you not being enough. It was always about me being weak. Your mother, I read it 3 times. Then I burned it, not out of anger. I'd moved past anger years ago, but because I didn't need it. I didn't need her explanation or her apology or her attempt at redemption. I didn't need anything from her at all. That was the real freedom, not caring anymore. I took the ashes of the letter and mixed them with soil, planting a jasmine bush in my garden. My grandmother had loved jasmine. It felt right, transforming my mother's words into something beautiful and alive. The bush bloomed that spring, filling my garden with fragrance. I never responded to the letter. I never reached out. I simply lived my life, full and free and entirely my own. 5 years after my return to America, I got a call from Emma's number. I almost didn't answer. The restraining order had expired, but I had no desire to speak to her. But something made me pick up. "Hello?" I said cautiously. "Lily, it's Emma." Her voice was different, smaller, quieter. "I know I have no right to call, but I wanted you to know. Mom's in the hospital. Liver failure. They don't think she has long." I felt nothing. No sadness, no satisfaction, just a vast, empty nothing. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because she keeps asking for you. She wants to apologize, to see you one last time." "She wrote me a letter years ago," I said. "That was her apology. She doesn't get another one." "Lily, please." No. The word was firm. "I'm not coming. I'm not forgiving. I'm not giving her a deathbed reconciliation so she can feel better about her choices. She made her decisions. I've made mine." "She's dying," Emma whispered. "We're all dying," I said. "Some of us just take longer. Goodbye, Emma." I hung up. 3 days later, my mother died. I found out through an email from my father. We weren't in contact, but he had my professional address. The funeral was on Tuesday. I was welcome to attend. I didn't go. Instead, I flew to Hong Kong and visited my grandmother's grave. I brought jasmine flowers and burned incense. I told her about my business, my house, my life. I thanked her for saving me, for believing in me, for giving me the tools to save myself. And I cried, not for my mother, but for the mother I'd never had, for the relationship that could have been in another life if she'd chosen differently. Then I dried my tears, placed the flowers on my grandmother's grave, and flew home. The years continued to pass, my business grew, my house filled with friends and laughter, and the occasional cat who wandered in and decided to stay. I learned to paint, to play piano, to speak 3 more languages. I traveled to places I'd never imagined seeing. I lived. Emma tried to contact me a few more times over the years, first with apologies, then with requests for money, finally with accusations that I was heartless, that I'd abandoned the family when they needed me most. I blocked her number and moved on. My father remarried, a kind woman who, according to Marcus, who heard through professional circles, was horrified when she learned the full truth of how he'd treated me. She apparently pushed him to seek therapy and make amends. He never did. I think he was too ashamed. That was fine. I didn't need his amends. I didn't need anything from him. On my 35th birthday, 7 years past when I died in my first life, I threw a party. Not for networking or appearances, but just for joy. I invited friends from all over the world. We filled my house with music and food and laughter. Marcus came with his new girlfriend, a fellow lawyer who specialized in protecting vulnerable people. She and I hit it off immediately. "You're the famous Lily," she said, shaking my hand. "Marcus has told me so much about you. You basically changed his life." "He changed his own life," I said. I just gave him a push. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had left, Marcus found me in the kitchen. I was washing dishes, my grandmother's mugs, which I'd used to serve tea. "You did it," he said simply. "Did what?" "Built a life, a real one. Free from all the poison." I dried one of the mugs carefully and set it back in its case. "Yeah," I said. "I guess I did." "Do you ever think about them, your family?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "But not like I used to. They're not a wound anymore. Just a scar. A reminder of what I survived." "Your grandmother would be proud," Marcus said. I smiled. "Yeah, she would." I'm 40 now. The age seems impossible. In my first life, I never made it past 28. Every day past that point feels like a gift, a bonus level in a game I'd already lost once. My business is international now, with offices in 5 countries. I have employees, partners, a legacy I'm building. I've been featured in magazines, given TED Talks on resilience and reinvention, written a book about finding strength after family trauma, published under a pen name, of course. Some privacy is sacred. Emma is still out there somewhere. Social media tells me she's moved to a different city, changed her name, tried to rebuild. I hope she's found some peace, some way to be better than she was. But I don't check often. Her life isn't my concern anymore. My father is retired now, living quietly. He's reached out a few times over the years, birthday cards, Christmas emails, awkward attempts at reconciliation. I respond politely but distantly. He's a stranger who shares my DNA, nothing more. I don't hate them anymore. Hate is exhausting, and I spent too many years, 2 lifetimes, exhausted by them. Now I just don't think about them much at all. That's the real victory, indifference. This morning, I made coffee in my grandmother's favorite mug, the one Emma tried to steal in another life, the one that started this whole journey. I stood in my kitchen, in my house, in my life, and felt a profound sense of gratitude, not for the rebirth, though that gave me knowledge and a second chance. Not for the money, though that gave me security and options, but for the choice. In my first life, I was a victim of circumstance, beaten down by people who should have loved me. In this life, I chose to be a survivor. I chose to fight back, to build boundaries, to value myself enough to walk away. That's what the mug represents now. Not what was stolen, but what I reclaimed. Not just the object, but my right to have beautiful things, to be cherished, to take up space in the world. I post a photo to Instagram, the same account I used to catfish Emma all those years ago. It's grown into a genuine business account now, showcasing antiques and telling their stories. The photo is simple. My grandmother's mug, filled with coffee, morning light streaming through the window behind it. The caption reads, "Grandmother's legacy, some treasures are worth protecting." It gets a few hundred likes, some comments from followers admiring the porcelain. One from Marcus, "Beautiful, she'd be proud." I smile and set my phone aside. Emma might see it, she might not. It doesn't matter. I'm not posting for her. I'm not living for her, or because of her, or in spite of her. I'm just living. And that, I think, pouring another cup of coffee from my grandmother's mug is the sweetest revenge of all.